Next on stage, we have Barry Plunkett of Skip Protocol, talking about AppChain MEV, building a customizable, composable, and open future. And in the other room, we have a breakout session happening with Florian from Q on social slashing versus constitutional slashing. Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's loud. A little quieter. Can you guys all hear me okay? Cool. My name is Barry Plunkett. I'm the co-founder of Skip Protocol. This is one of my first conference talks, and I'm super excited to be doing it here at the Staking Summit. Oh, thank you. My co-founder and I always talk about how we're super lucky to have validators as one of our core customers, so it's super exciting to be here. Most MEV talks are very technical, and I'm going to do something a little bit different and not make my talk super technical and talk about values instead and how Skip is trying to build resilient, governable MEV systems that can reflect the values of all of the different chains that make up Cosmos. I'm going to talk about how we're trying to do this so far and the products that we've built. And then I'm going to talk about the idea that unites those products, which is this idea of sovereign MEV. And then I'm going to talk about why that matters to us and how we're trying to build on that from here. So our first product is Skip Select. It's live on Juno as of last week, being run by 35 different validators now, I think. It's a pretty simple solution that's based on an auction that runs every block where searchers submit bundles of transactions to us, and we offer those searchers top-of-block execution. In exchange, they have to participate in an auction where only the searchers who pay the most receive that top-of-block execution, and then we forward the proceeds of that auction onto validators who run custom software that knows how to respect that auction. So validators make more money and searchers get better execution. We have a completely different solution that we're building out for Osmosis, which is fully on-chain, fully in the chain's binary. We're calling it the Proto-Rev module. It's a Cosmos SDK module. Proto-Rev is short for protocol revenue because we're not great at naming things. But the basic idea is after every transaction in Osmosis now, the module looks and sees whether there's a cyclic arbitrage opportunity that has opened up as a result of any kind of price movement. If there is, it goes ahead and rebalances pools to capture that without creating a new transaction. And then it forwards the revenue from that arbitrage onto the community for the community to do whatever the community might want to do with it. So at face value, these systems are very different. The Skip Select auction requires validators to run custom software, allows validators to make choices about how much MEV they're keeping versus giving to their delegators, and relies on searchers to find and compete for MEV opportunities and make them competitive. And the Proto-Rev module doesn't do any of that. It's fully on-chain. It's just a Cosmos SDK module. And so we got asked the question recently, like, why are you guys doing both of these things? They're very different. And on the surface, that's right. And our answer is that both of them are trying to drive towards MEV sovereignty, which is this idea that blockchains should be able to control their MEV markets and how they operate. And when I say blockchains, I mean the very diverse community of stakeholders that make up a chain. Validators, stakers, delegators, retail traders, market makers, everybody who has a stake in the chain's future should have a voice in how its MEV market operates. And that's what MEV sovereignty is all about. It's a rough, weird, hard thing to define. So for us, we have like 5 high-level principles that we try to build towards. The first one is giving communities block building control. So that's the ability to make decisions about the rules that are enforced when they're building their blocks. So do you have PBS, proposer builder separation? Is that full block or partial block? Do you allow sandwiching or front running, or do you not? These are choices that we think should be made at the chain level as well as at the validator level. Related to that, the second super important axis of control for us is revenue distribution control, right? So MEV is creating wealth, and the question is, where should that wealth go? How should it be divided among the stakeholders of the chain? Again, we think the chain should decide that. Should it go to validators entirely? Should it be split with validators and the network in some way? Should it be split with LPs or people who are being backrun or whose trading activity is actually creating MEV opportunities? Revenue distribution control is a super important part of MEV sovereignty for us. The third thing is on-chain governance. We think on-chain governance is super important. It's how Cosmos blockchains and most chains today make decisions about the products that they're building. And we want to, whenever possible, have these decisions be made as part of on-chain governance. And related to that, the fourth piece is compliance. So we want to try to build these systems in ways where the chain and the community of validators can collectively enforce compliance with whatever rules the chain wants to have, whether that's something where they're distributing revenue partially to stakers, partially to the network. We want to ensure that we can build these things in ways where it's hard to opt out if the chain at large decides that this is a future that they want. And related to compliance is transparency. So however these decisions get made, however they're configured, they should be publicly available. So stakers should know what choices validators are making, and validators should know what choices the community of validators have made. Both of the products we built today drive towards this future. So with ProtoRev, it's fully on-chain, top to bottom, been voted in by the community, approved by Osmosis governance, and makes revenue distribution completely transparent as part of the logic of the chain, and gives control of that entirely to the Osmosis community. Skip select, by way of some technical limitations we have right now, has these choices off-chain. So validators tell us how they want to split MEV revenue with their stakers, and our auction reflects that and respects that, and you can see that in transaction data on-chain, but we have to keep those choices off-chain, unfortunately, for the time being. And then we publish dashboards. So skip.money/dashboard, I think, will now show you how Juno validators are splitting their MEV rewards with their stakers and the choice each one is making around that. But this is the future we're driving towards. Okay, so who cares? Why do we want to do this? Why try to maximize MEV sovereignty as opposed to maximizing or minimizing an MEV? For us, the main reason is we think sovereignty is the thing that makes Cosmos Cosmos. We've been in the ecosystem less than a year now, but what has amazed us is the diversity of thought that different chains and the different communities that make them up have, not just about MEV, but about everything. And when we've asked them, okay, the validators in a particular chain, how do you want the MEV market to work? They'll give 10 different answers. Or if we ask one chain, they'll tell us, well, LPs, passive LPs should receive all of the revenue from MEV. And you ask another chain and they'll say, well, actually that should be part of the security budget and should all go to validators. And so for us, the takeaway is pure optimization is not expressive enough to build the systems that these folks want. And the second thing that I think is personally important, that often gets scrubbed from the conversation or swept under the rug, is that blockchains have different values And the communities that arise around them are a reflection of those values. And MEV is a million different things, but it's redistributive, right? Someone is going to make money off of arbitrage or liquidations or sandwich attacks or market making or what have you. And that money is going to oftentimes come from somewhere. It's going to give somebody else a worse execution price or give somebody a better execution price. And there's not like a right answer, at least in my opinion, about how the money should then be distributed, whether it should go back to LPs or validators or the community pool or whatever. That's a reflection of the values of that chain. In the same way that the tax policies that we have tried to come up with as nation states are a reflection of our values. And this is like, to me, the most important point here, which is that MEV is normative, right? That's something that if you leave this talk with anything, I want it to be that. And that how we build these systems implicitly describes what we care about and who we care about in these chains. And like, this is also why it's so important and so fun to work on, because like for the longest time, these were choices that only governments could make, right? And now we can make them as parts of communities that we can opt into and opt out of at will. So it's also like part of the core promise of crypto is that we can make these choices. It's also what makes cross-chain MEV so hard, in addition to all of the technical challenges, is if you want synchronous cross-chain composability to enable cross-chain MEV, you also have to deal with the fact that individual chains' MEV sovereignty is a prerequisite, and that you want to build these systems in a way that can continue to respect the values that each chain has decided that they have, and they don't just get overridden. And ideally, you want to build it in a way where there's no kingmaker, no tax collector that can profit off of all of these at the same time. We're working on this now, but this is also why we've chosen to start and focus so heavily on the single chain client initially. And we're deploying to a number of different chains, is that we want to ensure that first we capture the values of our individual chains and their communities, and then we think about composing them in the right ways. Cool. So I said the talk wouldn't get technical, but I want to talk about what Skip is doing next, and I'm going to get a little bit technical for a second, and then we'll come back up. So right now, the way Cosmos blockchains work is you have Tendermint, which manages consensus and building blocks, and you have the Cosmos SDK, which manages the logic of all of these different chains. So the Cosmos SDK just takes transactions one at a time out of Tendermint and does something with them. And so if you want to impact block building like we did with Skip Select, you have to modify Tendermint, build it in there, and you have to do stuff that's off-chain and suboptimal from our perspective in terms of MEV sovereignty. ABCI++ is changing this. It's a new set of features coming to Cosmos, which are super exciting. They do a bunch of things, but like a very important thing that they do is they make the application more responsible for building blocks. So they give app chain developers more tools to create MEV sovereignty for their chains. And they also give Skip the ability to build a toolkit for app chain developers to do that in the form of a Cosmos SDK module. So that's what we're starting to do. We're tentatively calling this the MEV SDK module, but this could change. The basic idea is to take the kinds of preferences that Skip Select is allowing validators to express in terms of how their blocks are built around whether they do or do not want to allow sandwiching, whether they want us to build the whole block for them or part of the block, or whether they want to run their own builder. And they're moving those things on chain, and they're going to add additional preferences there too. So right now, Skip Select only allows you to split MEV revenue between yourself and the network. You can't put an extra portion of that aside to give it specifically to your delegators unless you do that out of band. We're working on some changes that'll allow that as well. In addition to all of that, we're going to try to open up Skip to competition here as well. Right now, we have a privileged position in the infrastructure as the only block builder that can work with skip select, and that doesn't seem good long run. We've heard from a lot of our validator customers that MEV is a way they want to differentiate themselves, and they want to also have access to this system to participate as builders, and we want to open that up. And so the MEV SDK module is the way we're going to try to do all of this, to bring MEV sovereignty on-chain more and to open it up to more competition. So we're super excited about ABCI++. This is one of the big things we're going to be working on over the next few months, and something we're going to be looking for feedback from validators and chains around in terms of what kinds of choices should be made at the validator level, what kinds of choices should be made at the chain level as a part of governance, and how do we compose those things. No? Cool. So that's basically the talk. I'm going to say one more thing about why we care so much about this, which is a lot of these app chains and Cosmos in general has been powered by this really, really strong feedback loop that you have between validators and chain founders and users that we think over time is going to snowball it into the largest and the best by many different metrics crypto ecosystem. That's why we're taking such a big bet on Cosmos, which is that chain founders and their core teams come up with these ideas that impact user experience, and then users, by way of their delegations and the reputation that validators have, vote with their feet about which chains they want to be a part of and which validators they think are representing their beliefs well to the chain founders and to the chain at large. And they do that through their delegations. And then those validators hold those chain founders accountable. Are they being appropriately decentralized? Are they making progress towards their roadmap? How does their roadmap need to change to represent their delegators? And this cycle then powers better user experiences. And this is, to us, like the optimization wheel that powers Cosmos and has for a long time. And it's why MEV is potentially a threat, right? Because how blocks are built right now takes place completely out of bounds of the protocol, out of the application and the application code that those chain core teams can actually write. And it takes place in like the dark space between when a user signs a transaction and what the application eventually processes. And that's a risk, since what happens there doesn't necessarily represent users or validators well. It's also an opportunity. That's why it's exciting for us, because we can work through Sovereign MEV to bring those things into the bounds of this feedback loop and have MEV become a force that also powers Cosmos's growth and development. And that's really what Skip is going to try to do over the course of the next years. Focus on this idea of making MEV sovereign and making it something that the chains we work with and the communities we work with can actually control. That's it. Thank you, guys.